Hey there, welcome to day 32 of 100 Days of Code. Now today we're going to be learning about email SMTP and the datetime module. Basically, we're going to learn how to send email using Python code, and we're going to determine when we send the email using this datetime module. And once we've learned all of those skills, we're going to be building a really interesting and possibly helpful tool where we can automate a happy birthday email to all of our friends and family. So I probably only remember a handful of people's emails off by heart, and the rest of the time I rely pretty much on Facebook telling me that it's so-and-so's birthday, and I end up writing on their timeline. But if Facebook didn't tell me, I would probably not remember. Now, I know some friends of mine are really good at remembering everybody's birthday, even if they don't go on Facebook, and they'll send you a message every year showing how good of a friend they are, and it always makes me feel a little bit bad inside. So what's our solution? To remember everybody's date of birth? No. We're going to build a Python program. And this Python program is going to be the automated birthday wisher. All we have to do is create a spreadsheet of all of our friends' birthdays and then create a bunch of emails, and we'll randomly pick an email to send to each of these friends. And this program is going to teach us some skills in Python, helping us level up as a programmer, but also make us better people, because our friends will feel like we remember their birthdays and help our friends feel more appreciated. Email SMTP is a module that comes pre-bundled with Python, and it helps us send email using Python code. And datetime is another Python module that helps us figure out what today's date is or how to format a particular date and time. And in our case, it's going to help us figure out if today happens to be the day of one of our friends' birthdays, in which case we'll send them a birthday email. So that's the plan. Head over to the next lesson and we'll get started by learning how to send email. The first thing we have to figure out is how exactly does email work? We all know that we can log on to Gmail or yahoo.com and we can start filling out an email. It's pretty much second nature to everybody by now. But what actually happens behind the scenes? Well, let's say that we have a sender, Angela at gmail.com, and a recipient, Timmy at yahoo.com. Now, in order to send this email from my Gmail account to another email account, what happens behind the scene is that there's a Gmail mail server which will receive my message, and then there's a Yahoo mail server which will store the message until Timmy logs on to his computer and logs on to yahoo.com, which downloads the email from the Yahoo mail server. So this email is going to move between all of these steps. And in order to do this, it relies on something called SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And this contains all of the rules that determine how an email is received by mail servers, passed on to the next mail server, and how email can be sent around the internet. Now, a good analogy for SMTP is if you imagine these mail servers as a post office and Timmy's computer being the mailbox, then SMTP is basically the postman who knows how to handle the email and take it to various post offices and eventually put it into Timmy's computer. So in Python, there's a module called smtplib, which allows us to use SMTP to send our email to any address on the internet. To start, I recommend setting up 2 fresh email accounts. Create a new email account with Gmail and also create a new email account with Yahoo. These new email accounts will be perfect for testing your code and following along with the video tutorials. Plus, we'll be making those email accounts a little bit less secure to test our code, so that's another reason to set up some testing email addresses for now. After you've set up your new email accounts, head over to the course resources and download the zip file with the starting code for today's lessons. And then we're going to open that up using PyCharm. Now, I want you to take a look inside the starting project. There is a main.py file, and there's also a quotes.txt file. Don't worry about this file for now. We're going to come back to it when we explore the datetime module. For now, we're going to be working within the main.py, and I want to show you how you can use this smtplib library to start sending emails straight from your Python code. As always, we import the module smtplib, and then we can start using it. Once we've imported this SMTP library, essentially, we can use it to create a new SMTP object. So we're going to call that object a new connection, because it's basically a way for us to be able to connect to our email provider's SMTP email server. We're going to do this by tapping into the SMTP lib and then creating an object from the SMTP class. Now, when we create this object, one of the things that we should specify is the location of our email provider's SMTP server. Now, for Gmail, it's simply smtp.gmail.com, but it's different for every email provider. So that means if your email ends in @gmail.com, then this would be how you would connect to your email server. In our case, I've created a testing email called appbreweryinfo@gmail.com, and this part that's before the @ is the identity of my email account, and the part after the @ is the identity of my email provider. So in my case, I need to connect to smtp.gmail.com. But if you have a different email provider, for example, if you're with Hotmail, it's smtp.live.com. And if you're with Yahoo, it's smtp.mail.yahoo.com. And if you're with a completely different email provider, then simply just Google your email provider and the SMTP information. And you should find an article somewhere that describes a URL that looks something like this. Once I've created my connection, the next thing I need to do is to go ahead and call start TLS. Now, TLS stands for Transport Layer Security, and it's a way of securing our connection to our email server. So that way, when we're sending an email, if somebody else intercepts our email somewhere along the line and they try to read it, because this is enabled, that message will be encrypted and it will be impossible for them to read what is in the content of our email. So this line basically will make this connection secure. Now, once we've secured our connection, the next thing to do is to actually log in. So we'll call connection.login. And here we have to provide a username and a password. So the username is simply the email that we use to log on to our email service. So in my case, it's just my email. And the password, I've just made up a new password. So my made up password is ABCD1234 and then 2 brackets. And once I've logged in to my email provider, the final thing I want to do is to actually send my mail. Now, the from address is my email, and the to address is the person who I want to send the email to. So I've set up a new dummy account called appbrewerytesting@yahoo.com, and make sure that you haven't got any typos in your email, your password, the SMTP URL, or the recipient email address. Now, finally, the last thing we want to add is the message. So this is what we actually want to send in our email. And just like we did with our file, when we opened it at the very end, once we're done with it, we're going to close it off as well. So now we can go ahead and hit run. And you might get a number of errors at this point. Now, it's important that if you do get an error, then you first check to make sure that you haven't got any typos here, 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 or here. But once you've checked that through, then the next thing you can do is you can actually look at this error code and follow the URL. Now, in our case, the reason is because by default, Gmail doesn't just let anybody access your email account. And you have other ways of making your account even more secure. In order to send email from a Gmail account with Python, the first thing you have to do is create a special password for your application. This means you have to go to the security settings for your Google account. So if you're inside Gmail, go ahead and click on your profile, go to manage your Google account, and then go to security. Now, while you're here, you first have to turn on two-step verification. Once you've confirmed using your phone, go ahead and turn on two-step verification and then go back to the security page. And now you should be able to see this section, app passwords, show up. Go ahead and click on it and enter your password for your Google account again. And then go ahead and create a other type of app, and we'll name it Birthday Wisher, and click Generate. Now here's the really important part. You're going to get your app password show up here. I want you to select all of it and copy it, and then you'll be able to paste it inside your code. Once we've done all of this, then we can go back and hit run again. And you'll see this time we see the process finish with exit code 0, which means all of the code ran successfully. And now if I take a look at my sent box, you can see that I've got this message that's been sent. And if I take a look at the email address which the email was sent to, then you can see that in my inbox there's actually nothing here. But if you take a look inside spam, then there is our brilliant email that came from our Python code. So first thing I'm going to do is change that to not spam to make sure that it goes into the actual inbox. And the next thing we want to be able to do is how can we make our email seem less like spam? So an email without a subject headline is prime target for being filtered as spam. So let's go into our email and see how we can add a subject line. It's pretty simple. It goes inside the message parameter, and all we have to do is just write the word subject : and then we can put in whatever it is that we want to use as the subject of the email, like this. Now, how do you put in the content or the body of the email? Well, you add 2 new lines using \n\n, and then you can put the content. So this is the body of my email. And let's just split this up so it's a little bit easier to read. And now I can hit run again. And once that's done, you can see that in my Gmail, in the sent folder, that this message now has a subject line and a body. And it's the same thing when I go to my And when I take a look at this new email that came through, you can see the subject line and the body of the email being separated. Now, we can actually avoid having to write this line connection.close if we do the same trick as we did with file opening. We use the with keyword. So we can say that with smtp.smtp to create the connection, and then we save that as the connection. Then we can indent all of the rest of the code inside this block, and once it's done with sending the email, it will close off that connection automatically. So this is how you could send email using Python and smtplib. Now, there's quite a few things here that are prone to errors, especially given that we're typing a lot of things in plain text, like our email, our password, and a bunch of things. So if you're getting errors when you're running your code, or if it's not doing what you expect it to, make sure that you've checked against all of these strings and it's actually what you expected it to be. Secondly, make sure that whichever account you're sending from, that you actually go ahead into the account and modify the security settings. For example, let's say I wanted to send from this email address. So I'm going to put that in here. And then in this case, the email server I need to connect to will be Yahoo's email server, which is under the URL that I showed you before, smtp.mail.yahoo.com. And that is actually not enough. So let me just change my recipient. And I hit run. This is the error that you'll see. It says SMTP server disconnected, connection unexpectedly closed. Now this could be down to a number of reasons, for example, a typo in this part, but also if your account doesn't actually allow less secure apps. So on Yahoo, the process is a little bit different. You have to go into your account, go to account info, and then go to account security. And you'll have to log in again and generate a new app password. So we're going to create a new app and we're going to give it a custom name, Python code, and then click generate. And now we have a app password to use for our Python code. So now back over here, we change this password to the one that we just copied over. And now if I hit run, that error should go away and we should get process finished with exit code 0. And when I take a look over here in my inbox, I've got my email from app-retesting@yahoo.com. So check your security settings, check your spam, and check that you haven't made any typos. And if none of that works, then just simply try doing everything I did in the video, but with a new email account that you set up with Gmail. Then you can use the same SMTP address and the same process that you saw in the video to try this out. In this lesson, I want to talk to you about the Python datetime module. This is a really useful module that helps us work with dates and time. Going back to our day 32 start project, I'm going to comment out everything that's there. And then I'm going to import our datetime module. Now, again, this is a module that comes preloaded with Python, so you don't have to install it. Now, one of the most useful things to get with datetime is the current date and time. And you can write Python code to get that from the computer. Inside this datetime module, there is a class called datetime, as denoted by the C here. And this is how you get to that class. So to get to that class, you tap into the datetime module, and then you get to the datetime class. Now, this is really confusing, so I prefer to rename the datetime module and give it a as, so we can shorten it to just DT. And that way we can say dt.datetime, and that looks a little bit more easier to understand than before. Now, inside this datetime class, there is a method called now, and this gets you the current date and time. So if we save this into a variable called now, and we go ahead and print now, then when I run this code, you can see it prints a very long string showing you the current year, month, day, as well as time in my local time zone, with a high degree of accuracy here. Working with that particular string is not very easy. If you wanted to check something like if now is the year 2020, then you can't really do that with just a string like that. That's why once you've gotten the now object out of this method, because this method of course returns and it gets saved inside here, then we can tap into some of its attributes. So for example, we can tap into the year. So let's save that as the year. And if I print that, you can see it just gives us the year as a number. And if I do a type check on that, you can see that it has a class of integer, Whereas if I do a type check on now, it has a class of a datetime object. So this way, if we manage to get hold of the year as a number, then we can say something like, well, if the current year is equal to 2020, then we will print something like, and because this rings out as true, then that gets printed out. In addition to the year, we've also got month, day, hour, minute. So you can basically tap into anything in that date time string as you need. So when you write now and you write dot, you can see that there's the year, day, month, hour, minute, microsecond, second, and you can get to the specific part of that date time that you need. You can even call other methods like weekday. For example, if we want to know which day of the week it is, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then we can simply tap into now and call this weekday method. And now if we print out this day of the week, you can see that it gives us a number. So remember that computers start counting from 0. So 1 means that it's actually the second day of the week, which is Tuesday, as you can see up here. So we've seen how we can get hold of the current day, year, month, and whichever property you're interested in for today. But what if we wanted to create a datetime object of our own, setting it to a particular date of our choosing? Well, let's say that I wanted to create an object that stored my date of birth. Well, then I would tap into the DT module and create a new datetime object from that class. Now I get to specify, well, what is the year? What is the month? What is the day? And I can even go even more specific, like which hour was I born in? And you'll notice that in here, when you look at the parameters, the year requires an integer, the month requires an integer, and the day requires an integer. But after the hour, we've got this ... as does the minute and the second. And this is because they have default values. So if I delete this, the only things I'm required to give when I'm creating a new datetime object is the year, month, and day. Let's say that I was born in 1995 and I was born in December the 15th. Now, if I print this date of birth object, you can see that we get 1995, 12:15, and the time in hour, minute, and second are set to the default values of 0. If I wanted to be more specific and I wanted to set my hour of birth, let's say I was born at 4 a.m., then we can set the hour and that updates that default value. So now we've seen how we can tap into the current date time and also create any datetime object from scratch. Then it's time to put this into practice and use it in our project. Now let's put what you've learned into practice by creating a Monday motivational quote email application. To get warmed up, we're going to create an application that looks at the current date and time, and if it happens to be a particular day of the week, let's say a Tuesday, then we're going to email ourselves a motivational quote. So I found 101 Monday motivational quotes from a place called the Positivity blog, and I'll link to this as well. But the idea is that we all need a little bit of a boost on Monday mornings, and getting an email from Albert Einstein might just be the little nudge that we need in order to push us onto a successful week. So that's the idea. And if you take a look in the starting project that you've already downloaded and opened up, there should be a quotes.txt file. And here on each line, I've placed the quote from the Positivity blog, and it's got the quote and person on the same line. So you can use what you've learned before, where we went into how to read files, how to open files, how to create a list of all of the lines inside a particular text file. And you can use that along with what you've learned about sending emails to check and make sure that the day of the week is your current day of the week, because obviously you need to test this. Instead of setting it to check for Monday, I want you to check for the current day that you're on. So if it happens to be Tuesday, then check for Tuesday. If it's Saturday, then check for Saturday. And I want your Python code to make that check. And if it matches today's weekday, then to send an email with a random quote from the quotes.txt. That's the goal. So I want you to pause the video and give that a go. All right, so in order to complete this mini project, we first have to import those two modules we learned about, smtplib and also the datetime module. And again, I'm going to import it as DT, so give it an alias. Next, we're going to tap into the DT module and we're going to get today's date and time. So we're going to use this now method. If now is equal to this, then today in terms of the weekday is equal to now.weekday. And once we've gotten hold of that, then we can check, well, if the weekday is equal to, say, Monday, which would be 0, then that means we're going to activate the rest of our code and send ourselves the email. But of course, in order to test our code, unless you have the patience to wait until next Monday and test your code once every week, then we probably want to set this to equal to the weekday that we're on today. So in my case, I'm on Tuesday, so I'm going to set that to equal to 1, at least while I'm testing my code. And once I'm done with everything, I can reset that to 0 for Monday. If the weekday is equal to 1, then we're going to initiate our email sending mission. But first, we have to figure out what we're going to send. So we're going to open up our quotes.txt, and I'm going to use the with, and then I'm going to use the open method to open the quotes.txt file that I've got right here, and I'm going to call this the quote file. Inside this quote file, I've got a bunch of quotes, one on each line. So we can use the method called read lines in order to get a list of all of the lines in this quote file. And I'm going to save it into all quotes. Now we can import the random module and we can tap into a random quote. So we'll use random.choice and we'll get a random quote from this list of quotes. Now that we've created our quote inside this with block, we can actually go outside of the with block and we can still access our quote. So if I go ahead and print our quote, you can see we've picked out a random quote. If you want to make an easy job seem mighty hard, just keep putting off doing it, by Olin Miller. And this is what we're going to try and send to ourselves using the smtplib. Again, inside the same if statement, we're going to create a new connection, which is created from the smtplib and the smtp class. Now, once we create this class, we have to provide a host. So that's the URL of the email server that we're going to use. Again, I'm going to use my email as my testing Gmail. That was appbreweryinfo@gmail.com. And then I'm going to put in my password as well as a constant. So this was ABCD1234 and then brackets. And then we can add our SMTP URL. Because we know that we're sending it from the Gmail email service, then I'm going to tap into the Gmail SMTP server. So that's smtp.gmail.com. And instead of saving this as a connection, I'm going to use the with method with SMTP as the connection. Then using this connection, I'm going to firstly secure it. So I'm going to start TLS, and then I'm going to get this connection to log me in. So the username is my email, and the password is my password. Once I've logged in to this connection, then I'm going to finally send my email. Now, in this case, the from address is going to be my email, and the to address is also my email. I'm just sending an email from myself to myself, but it's going to have a different piece of content every time it sends it. And that message is going to contain that content. So I'm going to change this into an F string because firstly, I want to have a subject, which I'll call Monday Motivation. And then we know that we can add the content by adding 2 line breaks. So let's format this so that it's easier for you to see. And I'm going to put it onto separate lines like this. Now, after these 2 new lines comes my content, which is basically going to be my F string that's going to insert my quote right here. So now with all of that done and making sure that our weekday is set as the same day as today. So weekday equals 1, that is Tuesday. Weekday is 0, means it's Monday. Then we can be sort of sure that this code is actually going to run. So now if we run our code, you can see the quote being printed out here by Bertrand Russell. And if we go to our email, you can see that email from ourselves. Monday motivation. One of the symptoms of an approaching nervous breakdown is the belief that one's work is terribly important. So I guess today's motivation is to not take ourselves too seriously. But this is essentially what we're looking to achieve. So hopefully you managed to get that working. If not, you can take a look at my finished code, including all of the previous sections on smtplib, sending email, as well as date time, in the day 32 ending code that you'll find on the course resources page. Now we're pretty much ready to tackle our final project, which is the automated birthday wisher. So for that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. Now it's finally time to put all of our skills to use by creating our automated birthday wisher, which is going to send our family or friends a happy birthday email on their birthday automatically. Now, the idea for this project actually came from my mum, well, inadvertently. Now, I love my mum to bits, and she is my biggest source of motivation and inspiration. But on her birthday, she always expects me to send her some form of happy birthday by like 8 a.m. And if I send her a message at like 8:05 or 9 o'clock, God forbid, then I am deemed as a bad child. I don't know if this is true for you. Maybe other Asian kids out there can relate, but my mom has this thing about being wished a happy birthday promptly on her birthday. And, you know, I always remember her birthday, but I just might remember it at 10 o'clock or, you know, at lunchtime. And I always panic thinking that I've forgotten or missed the crucial 8 o'clock in the morning time slot. So what did I decide to do? I decided to use Python to create a automated way of wishing her a happy birthday at 8 a.m. on the spot, or even 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock. That way she'll think that I wake up really early and I'm working really hard in life. But let me demonstrate to you what this app is going to do. This is the birthday wisher demo, and I'm not going to show you the code in my main.py because that is what you're going to create. But what I've got here is a CSV file called birthdays.csv. Now here, I'm going to change one of these rows of data to test it. And I'm going to change the month to the current month, which is July, and the day to the current day, which is 14. So I'll change this, which corresponds to this column of data, to 7, and then the day to 14. And then I'm going to hit save to save that data. And now I'm going to run this code. And what it will do is it'll check against all of these dates inside my birthday CSV, it'll find that one of these rows of data actually has a month and day that matches today, and it will pick a random letter from one of these text files and replace this name placeholder with the name of the row of data that actually matched today's date. And then it's going to send that as an email to this email. So now if I go ahead and hit run, and once that process is finished, we can go and check our email. And you can see that email show up here with a subject line of happy birthday, and it's replaced the name of the person whose birthday it is right here inside that name placeholder. It sent the rest of the message, and this was all done automatically. As you can imagine, if I change this back to a random date, if our code was running in the background every single day, checking to see if today's date matched one of these dates, then the day when it actually matches, so on their birthday, it's going to pick out their name, insert it into one of these letters randomly, and then send it to them as an email. And the reason why we have 3 letters is just because so that they don't actually clock on to the fact that it's the same letter being sent every single year. The ethics of this whole project is really up to you to decide. I don't actually do this in reality. I just live with being told that I'm a bad child by wishing my mom happy birthday at 10 a.m. instead of 8. But in terms of Python programming, this is going to be a really interesting project because it's going to use a lot of the things that you've learned before, like pandas to read CSVs, or replacing text, doing mail merge, using built-in Python ways of opening and reading files, and also, of course, what we learned recently, which is the datetime module and the smtplib. Now, the starting project I've split into 3 difficulty levels. So depending on how comfortable you feel with the things that you've learned in all of these 32 days, you can pick which level of starting project you want to use. Obviously, if you go for the extra hard starting project, it's not going to have a lot of hints in there. It's going to tell you generally what the program needs to do, and it's your job to figure out how to actually implement it using maybe Google search or Stack Overflow or looking through some of the past lessons. This is going to be the extra hard version. And then there's the hard version with some hints, but not a lot. And there's the normal version where I've put in a lot more hints that'll make it a little bit easier for you to write out all the code. So depending on how confident you feel, head over to the course resources, pick the difficulty level for your starting project, and then go ahead and try to complete this project. Now, I hope you've given this project a good go, because I'm going to now go through the solution for the normal starting project. Now, the important thing to stress here is that if you used one of the hard starting project or the extra hard starting project, you might have ended up with a different method of doing the same thing. And often I get students asking me, what is the right way of doing things? And this is not really the thing that you should focus on. Instead, use your creativity, use your skills, and make sure that your program does what you want it to. There is no real right answer. It really depends on your preferences or even what it is that you know how to do. If you can get this project to work using just your own skills and a bit of Googling, a bit of Stack Overflow, as long as you manage to get it to work, it's way more important than what is the right way of doing things. So all of that, I'm trying to say that I'm going to go through the solution, but don't view this as the ultimate solution. And if you did it a different way, that's totally fine, as long as it works. All right, let's get started. So here I've got the starting file for the normal starting project, and I'm going to go through each of the lines line by line to create our final birthday wisher project. The first thing the instructions tells us to do is to go into this birthdays.csv and update this with some birthdays of our friends and family. So I'm going to replace all the data that's currently in here, and I'm going to add some data of my own. Now, the thing that we have to do in order to test this code is to make sure that one of these rows of data actually matches an email that we can access and also today's month and day. So today is July 14th, so I'm going to update those two numbers, and the year doesn't matter so much in this case. Once I've done that, I'm going to hit save, Command S, or just go to File and go to Save All. And you can also see the shortcut for your particular operating system there as well. Now, inside my main.py, I've now completed this step, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Now, step 2 is the hardest, and here we have to check if today's date matches a birthday in the birthday CSV. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import datetime, because that's going to be crucial for me to be able to figure out what today's date actually is. And in fact, that is what hint 1 says. It says to create a tuple from today's month and day using the datetime module. This is essentially what we want to create. So how do we get hold of today's month? Well, we can use the datetime module and then the datetime class, and then we can call now, and we can get hold of the month like this. Now, we can simplify this in a number of ways. We can create an alias for datetime as DT, so then we can shorten this by a little bit, or you can shorten it even more just by saying, well, from the datetime module, let's go ahead and import just the datetime class. That way you can actually set this to simply as datetime.now.month. Then we have to get hold of today's day. So we could copy this, and instead of getting the month, we could get the day. So now we've created today. Now you can of course split this into two parts if you find it easier to understand. You could say that today, well, is equal to datetime.now. And then today tuple is equal to a tuple, which is today.month, today.day. So this is another variation, and there's millions of variations out there, of course. So I think we're now done with hint 1, so let's go and delete it. Now we're on to hint 2. We're going to use pandas to read from the birthday CSV. So we're going to import pandas. And once we've imported that, we're going to use pandas to read CSV and then provide our file name, which is birthdays.csv. So I'm going to save this as a variable called data. And remember, this is now a pandas data frame, which we can use to do a number of things with, including using these instructions to create a birthday dictionary. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a dictionary comprehension. And I provided the template here for you already. So you can use that iter rows in order to iterate through our data frame that was created here. So data.iter rows, and then we'll get hold of the index of each of those rows and also the data in each of the rows. And then we could create a new dictionary with a new key and a new value from all of these things that we've iterated through. What is that new key going to be? Well, it's going to look something like this, right? We're hoping to create this birthday dictionary using this particular format. Now, the key is going to be a tuple that consists of the birthday month and the birthday day. So let's replace that new key with a tuple. And the birthday month is of course going to come from our data row. So we're going to say data row, and then we can either use square brackets or we can use the dot notation to get hold of the data in this month column. So you can either say data row dot month or data row square brackets and then month like this. So it's totally up to you. And then the next item in the tuple, which is still in the key, so we're still before the colon here, is going to be the birthday day. So that's going to be the data row, and then we have to pass in the name of the day column, which is just the word day. Now, once we've done that, then we have to provide what is the value for each of these key value pairs in our dictionary. Well, what we actually want is the data row, so the entire row of data. And we want it to look a bit like this. So we have our tuple with our month and our day as the key, and then the value is just the entire row of data. So we can simply replace this value with our data row like this. Now we're pretty much done with this part, and we can delete all of these bits of hints and comments, and I can delete this example code as well. Now that we've got our birthday dictionary, the next thing we want to do is we want to check to see if today matches a birthday in the birthday CSV. So we want to check if this tuple exists inside this birthday dict and if it matches one of the actual birthday month and days. So we can do something like this. If today month, today day is in our birthdays dictionary. Now, this today month, today day is of course going to be our today tuple. And this way, with this if statement, we can check to see if this today tuple with the month and day actually exists as one of our friends and family's birthdays inside this birthdays dict. And once we've done that, then we can get rid of step 2 and move on to step 3. In step 3, we're saying, well, if there is a match, so if this if statement is true, then we're going to pick a random letter out of letter 1, 2, 3 from our letter templates inside here. To do that, we're going to need to think about the relative file path. So we have to access the letter template folder to get to each of these files. The file path will look something like this. It'll be letter templates / one of these letters, for example, letter 1.txt or letter 2 or 3. In fact, this particular number is going to be something that we're going to generate randomly, and we're going to put in there as a f string. So I need to now import the random module in addition to everything else. And we can go ahead and call the random module and get a rand int between 1 and 3. Like this. So now we've completed these 2 hints, and finally we're going to use the replace method to replace the name placeholder inside each of these letters right here with the actual name of the person whose birthday it is. Here I've linked to the documentation for the replace keyword, and this is what it looks like. For example, if we have a string like this, then we can say text.replace, take the word that we want to take out, and then the word we want to put in. In our case, we're going to have to read the text from this file with our with, open, and then the file path goes in here, and then we'll call this the letter file. And then from this letter file, we're going to get the contents by reading from this letter file. Now, once we've gotten the contents, then we can say contents.replace, and the thing that we want to replace is that hard-coded name placeholder, and the thing we want to replace it with comes from the current matching birthday. If the today tuple exists inside our birthday dictionary, then we can get hold of the entire row of data by taking our birthday dictionary and then getting hold of the item at the key which matches today tuple. Remember that today tuple is the month and day as a tuple, and the birthday dictionaries all have keys as the birthday month and birthday day as a tuple. So we've checked that this tuple exists as a key inside the birthday dictionary, and then we use the square bracket to actually access the data row for that particular match. And then we've got the birthday person. So from that birthday person, we're going to get hold of their name. And the name lives under the name column here. As long as we put the name as a string, then we should be able to get hold of their actual name right here. And that is the end of step 3. So now we're finally moving on to step 4, where we're going to send our letter, which was generated here in our contents, and we're going to send it to that birthday person's email address. So the first thing we're going to need is to create a connection, and we're going to use the smtplib library to do that. So import smtplib, and then we're going to say with smtplib.smtp, let's create an object from that, and we have to provide the host string. So as I mentioned, before, depending on which email provider you use, it will be different. Now, I'm going to put in my email and password at the top as constants. Of course, this is not going to work for you, so you're going to have to use your own email and password. And depending on which email provider you use, you'll have to pick the correct SMTP. So I'm sending emails using Gmail, so I'm going to change this to smtp.gmail.com. And I'm going to save this connection that I create as the connection. Step 2 is to go ahead and call the start TLS. So we'll get our connection and then call start TLS. And then step 3 is to log in to our connection by calling login. And then we have to provide the email that we want to log into and the password for that email account. Finally, we're going to set up the subject and the content by calling connection.sendMail. And the from address is my email. The to address is going to be the email of the birthday person. So we're going to get our birthday person, and then we're going to get hold of their email by looking at the name of the email column, which is just email actually, like this. And then finally, we can add in the actual message. I'm going to again format this so that it's a little bit easier to read for you. And then we're going to set up our message. This is going to be an F string, and the subject is always going to be the same. It's going to be happy birthday. And then after 2 of these new lines, we can add the actual message body. Now the message body is going to be the contents that we created, because remember, that takes a random letter, reads it, and then replaces it, the name placeholder, with the birthday person's name. So that's what we're going to put in here. And now that's step 4 completed as well. And we can now go ahead and run this file, and hopefully it will show us process finished with exit code 0, which is the best thing we can see. That means everything went well. And remember that the birthday, which I set to test, was this row of data. So it should have replaced a random letters placeholder with the name of mum, and it should have sent that email to appbreweryinfo@gmail.com. So now if I take a look at my appbreweryinfo@gmail.com, you can see the email come through, but you might notice a bug here. The name was actually never replaced. Instead, we're still seeing this placeholder. So this is a really common mistake that a lot of people make. And the reason is because the text replacement comes out as the output. So it doesn't actually change the original text just by calling that method. Instead, you have to save it to a new variable in order to see the replaced text. So in our case, what that means is we can't just say content.replace. We actually have to say contents equals contents.replace. So we replace the contents and then we save it back to the original variable. So now if I run this again, you can see that this time our message actually has the name replaced in here. It has a random letter that it's generated, and it has sent it to the correct email address. If you want to take a look at the completed code, then you'll find it in the course resources as the end code for the Birthday Wisher project. And this contains a lot of things that we've talked about so far, including dictionary comprehension, reading CSVs, creating data frames from pandas, using and creating tuples, working with dictionaries, file paths, opening files, replacing files, reading them, and of course, writing and sending email, as well as the datetime module. So if you got stuck on any of these aspects, then be sure to take a look at the previous lesson where we covered them, because we covered all of these concepts in a lot of detail in previous lessons. So make sure that you don't just skip ahead if you actually got stuck. It probably is an indicator that it's a good time to revisit and review some of these concepts. For example, if you got stuck on dictionary comprehension, then go back to the lessons where we did list and dictionary comprehensions and try out some of the exercises again, just to refresh your mind. Now, if you got stuck on working with the iter rows or the data that comes from our pandas data frames, then go back to those lessons where we talked about CSVs and we talked about pandas, because nothing here is new, but it does require your understanding and your ability to know how to apply the knowledge that you've learned before. Now, the final thing I want to show you in the next lesson is how to get this code to actually run every day, so that it can actually check every single day to see if it needs to send out a birthday email. So for all of that and more, I'll see you on the next lesson. In previous lessons, we completed our automated birthday wisher Python project and also the motivational quotes on Monday's Python project. But at the moment, you'll notice that this code is only going to work to continuously check to see which day it is currently, compare it against the birthdays, and then run the code if this code is actually running constantly in the background. Now, you could, of course, open up your project in PyCharm, hit run every single day and make sure that it works. But that's actually more effort than wishing somebody happy birthday manually. So what do we do instead? Well, we want some sort of way where we can host our code in the cloud and run our code every single day. So one way of doing that is using a service called Python Anywhere. And they have a free tier where we can do exactly that without having to pay anything. Head over to pythonanywhere.com and go ahead and sign up for a new account. Now, once you've signed up and signed in, then you want to go ahead and start adding some files. Head over to the Files tab right here, and we're going to upload the files that's currently inside our Birthday Wisher project. So that's our main.py, our birthday CSV, and also our letter templates. Now, we want our letter templates to be inside a folder, so we're going to create a new directory called letter templates. Make sure there's no typos there. And then inside this directory is where we're going to upload these three files. So letter 1, 2, and 3. So now we've got our letters inside home/appbury/letter templates, and inside appbury we've got our birthday CSV and our main.py. So now we're going to go into our consoles and we're going to create a new bash console. So we're going to click on this link right here. And then once all of that's loaded and you see this $sign right here, we're going to type python3 main.py. Now you might see this error right here, the SMTP authentication error. And this is something that happens because our Python program is trying to log in to our email, and our email provider, in this case it's Google, is actually blocking it. So we can copy this URL, and you can see it ends right here because there's a space there, and we can paste it into the address bar, and it takes us to this problem. I can't sign in to my email client. And this is essentially what our Python code is trying to do. So what we need to do is click on this link to display the unlock captcha. We click continue, and it's now enabled our code to sign in again. So we have to go back and type in exactly the same as we did before, python3 main.py, but this time it should complete without giving us any errors. And it does that by showing us the $sign again and our prompt. And now if I head back into my email, you can see that this email was actually sent because the code was initiated inside Python Anywhere. So going back to our Python Anywhere dashboard, we can go to the tasks section to actually schedule a task to run. Now to set up a scheduled task, we're going to type the same command that we did in the console, which is python3 main.py. And then we're going to schedule this at a particular time. And the server time is based on UTC. So you can take a look at the current time in UTC by typing in UTC now into Google. And you can see right now it's 12:09. So if I go ahead and schedule this for 12:10 and I hit create, then at the time when this particular time hits, when it becomes 12:10, then our command should be run and we should see a happy birthday email show up in our testing Gmail account. So right now, UTC has just gone to 12:10. And so if we wait for this scheduled task, we can click on this button to view the task log. And you do have to be quite patient because sometimes it might take a while before that task actually gets executed. So just keep checking the task log until you see this happen. Completed task at 12:10:56, so at the end of that minute, took 16.92 seconds, return code was 0, which means it was successful. And now we can see that email show up in our Gmail account, and this was completely automated and it was done by Python Anywhere. So now if we have that code running in the background, every day you can get it to run that code at this particular time or another time of your choosing. In fact, if you're not testing it, you can actually get it to run much earlier. Let's say maybe 7 o'clock UTC. Then it'll send the email out in the morning. And every day it's going to check whose birthday it is in your birthday CSV and then send an email to them and do all of that fancy stuff using what we did with Python. Python Anywhere has really good forums for help and advice. And on the free tier, you can only schedule one task to run, so one particular code base. Now, I don't work for them and I have no relations to them, but I find it really helpful to have a really simple way of getting my Python scripts to run every day at a particular time. So have a look at that and you can use it if you find it helpful as well.